There you go. So good afternoon, everyone. Bill Phillips here, Prince George Daily News with our weekly panel. We've been away for a couple of weeks, and sorry, we've had some technical glitches here, but not really glitches. It's just me.
So it took us. It can be a glitch.
That can be a glitch. Yeah, took us a couple of tries to get going here. I'm joined by Tracy Calageros today, and Chuck Nisbet is trying to sign on by the looks of things, so it looks like he will be joining us as well. And remind everyone who's watching on Facebook Live, if you want to ask us a question, just post a comment on there. We'll try to get to it. No guarantees though, so who knows? But we try.
You're the only one who can see the comments while this is going on.
So. I know, and then I need another device to actually see my comments. So. So we talked a little bit earlier about, or I guess a couple of things in the news this week that we could probably talk about. Just before we got on, we were commenting a little bit about Williams Lake Mayor Walt Cobb got himself in hot water, and if you know Walt, you will preface that with again by posting reposting a comment about residential schools and. Basically saying, well, there's two sides to the issue. Well, that's out of sync and out of touch with reality today, as we all know. This isn't an issue where there are two sides and two opinions. This is one where what was happening in the residential schools was simply wrong. And he apologized last night to City Council, if you saw it. But Tracy, your thoughts on this?
Well, he sort of apologized and then followed it up with a rebuke of the Indigenous nations that had written letters of complaint after he had posted it on social media. So I don't know how sincere the apology actually is, especially given that it's repetitive. It's not like this is the first time he's had an issue like this. So this is not the kind of leadership that BC or any place needs right now. We need leadership that is full of empathy and that is interested in really bringing people together, even if you're not talking about reconciliation with Indigenous nations. If you're just talking about bringing community together at a municipal level, we need leaders that are willing and able to have those conversations in a way that makes sense. And I'd like to see some of the other leadership step up and actually say something this time around. I realize the provincial government can't do anything to remove a duly elected mayor, but we've got lots of other people that I'd love to know what their comments are. What do our MPs have to say about something like this? I mean, Mr. Doherty grew up in Williams Lake. Walt's been mayor for what, 30 years or something?
Off and on, yeah. And he's been MLA. He was MLA for one term in the 90s somewhere. I can't remember exactly when, or maybe early 2000s, I'm not sure. But yeah, so this is a guy that's been around politics for a long time. So it's not like he's a neophyte and just simply stuck his foot in his mouth. He should know better, and I spent 15 years in Williams Lake, and I know that the First Nations issues down there are front and center, as they should be. When we were down there, what I would often tell people is that in Williams Lake, for us as a journalist, we report on 3 different tribal councils and 15 bands. That was in our readership area. So there's lots of lots of Indigenous issues down there, and Walt's been there, and council. So like I say, Scott Nelson is the councillor down there. Ivan Bonnell is the councillor. They've been there as long as Walt, and they've come out and said that they didn't like Walt, but nobody called for him to step down. Nobody on council, anyways. And
I think there was one councillor that asked for his resignation.
Was there? Okay.
A member of one of the local Indigenous nations. But Walt's been around this block more than once. And if you can't claim that you didn't know what you were doing, whether you were the claim that you're just resharing something on social media. Well, there's been enough education out there, particularly for elected officials, around what you do and don't do on social media. There's no question that the residential schools genocide is real and has huge hurtful impacts on people all across this nation. For him to make the comments that he made and then his follow-up so-called apology, I don't know. I sincerely hope that the folks in Williams Lake decide to rethink who they're electing as their leadership, because that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable 20 years ago, and it sure as heck isn't acceptable today. And I'm not buying the, oops, I didn't realize I was just resharing something. One of the comments I saw from one of the other counselors was, well, you can think these things, but just don't say them. Yeah, you know what? I don't think you can think those things in leadership, not at this time in society, certainly not here in BC.
Hopefully we've progressed enough that we're not thinking those things anymore. We've been, Chuck Nisbet has joined us now, and Chuck, as you probably obviously picked up on, we're talking about Williams Lake Mayor Walt Cobb and his apology to the Indigenous community after sharing a post on his Facebook page, which basically said, no, there's two sides to the residential school story. And I don't know if you have any thoughts or comments on.
I have many.
Okay, we're going for 2 hours today. No.
Let me just say I agree with Tracy. And if you're an elected official, you've got to be aware of what's going on. And I cannot figure out how you would say, oh, well, it's not really what I thought. I just thought I would share it. Come on, give me a break. This guy has got to get it together. I don't know his record in Williams Lake. I don't know if he's a long-term incumbent or what it is, or if he's done wonderful things for the community. He may have, but you got to get your head out of where. I mean, come on, people. That's just not smart at all. Yeah, I think this guy, he needs a good slap upside the head, and I think he might just get it next time the election comes through there. So
yeah, I don't think it's representative of Williams Lake. My experience campaigning down there in 15 and 19 is that there is a lot of progressive thought and certainly lots of empathy and interest in having a collaborative relationship, not just with Indigenous communities, but with everyone in the area. And I mean, that's the only way our communities are going to survive into the future, is if we get all the brain power.
Oh, I think we lost Tracy.
Yeah, I'm having the internet troubles today too.
Okay. Well, hopefully Tracy will come back. Oh, there she is. Sorry, we lost you for a second there, Tracy.
Tech. All of my tech died in here. I don't know what's going on.
It's one of those days. I ran into Todd Doherty in Williams Lake this summer, and I was talking to him for a little bit, and I really don't think that's the way the Lakers think. This guy's, that was out there and stupid, just basically stupid, a dumb thing to do. And what were you thinking? Come on, get your head together. Really not good.
But it's kind of endemic. We see it, there was what's her name, Machete or whatever, I can't remember her name, who's the mayor of Puskapay, who did a very similar type thing, right? And we see this cropping up from politicians here and there. So I guess it's kind of, how do these politicians get? Well, I know I've known Walt for 30 years, and the Walt's draw, I guess, is he's a hell of a nice guy, but he's a little wacko sometimes. But he's well known over the years for saying stuff that gets him in trouble. And I don't know if it's just a blind spot or whatever, but I don't know.
I think it's important to recognize the language on that, though. It isn't just that Walt says things that get Walt in trouble. Walt says things that are racist and misogynistic.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the result is for Walt on that one, because it doesn't get him in enough trouble that he doesn't get reelected. Who we vote for matters. Who we elect matters. And I know it's hard sometimes to pay attention or to care or to find a candidate that you believe in, but you need to know who you're sending to represent you at any level of government, because these are the kinds of mistakes that get made when you just sort of tick a name because you know it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the things that one of the stories that I read there is Charlene Ballou, if anybody knows her, she was appointed by the province to be an Indigenous liaison of some sort. And she's the former chief down there. And it was interesting because a lot of the media didn't show her comments. But I think I found a story from the Williams Lake Tribune, and she talked about how she was literally in tears while she was driving to that meeting to address city council last night. And that just sort of shows that how these comments can affect people. And it certainly as leaders and as politicians, I think you have to understand or try to realize that comments, especially stuff you share on Facebook, and I've seen that before, a lot of people on Facebook, politicians and that kind of say, well, it's my personal Facebook account, it's my opinion. Well, not when you're elected. You kind of give up on that. Well, I should say give up on that, but and a lot of politicians will have their personal Facebook account and their professional one, and hopefully they learn to keep the difference. But that doesn't mean, the point is that on Facebook everything's public.
Yeah.
So even if you're you're saying, well, it's my personal Facebook account, well, it's still public. So people will say it or will see it. So.
Well, you think people would have learned from Trump, right? I mean, Trump would tweet things in the middle of the night, well, don't go on your Facebook in the middle of the night if you're not thinking straight, or if you had a couple of whiskeys or whatever. Just don't, don't be a Trump. That's straightforward. Don't be a Trump. We don't need any more of those.
Yeah. And the First Nations leadership down there is calling for his resignation, and there's been criticism of council for not. But the reality is that council really can't remove an elected mayor or an elected official. So it is kind of tough. So what do you do with people that say these kind of things and are elected? And do we have to wait until the next election to get rid of them? I don't know.
Well, I imagine that the First Nations down there are starting to put pressure on him to resign, and there's a lot of pressure that people can bring to bear, especially companies that are run by First Nation companies that are run down there that go, well, maybe we shouldn't be dealing so much in Williams Lake and things like that, right? So pressure can be brought to bear to get someone to resign. I mean, the council can't say, yeah, we want you to split. But if enough pressure comes around, he would be doing an injustice to Williams Lake to stick around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say that people are probably already making choices about where they want to live and where they want to work. And you're looking at that elected leadership. You're looking at the kinds of stories there are that you can Google and read about as you're making a choice as to where to base your business's head office out of. I certainly wouldn't be beating down the bushes to try and open something in Williams Lake right now.
No.
That doesn't represent my way of thought. It doesn't represent how I want my leadership to speak, and so I would simply avoid the whole city altogether. Those are the kinds of consequences when you have lousy leadership.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, Bill. I don't know what you do in a short-term immediate situation. I mean, there used to be all that talk about recall, but I think that was all at the federal level, wasn't it? Or was it provincial?
Federal and provincial. I think provincially, the legislation is in place. You can actually recall someone, but the threshold is so high it's virtually impossible, anyways.
Mm.
So, yeah, I don't know. Hopefully,
elections are the performance review, and yeah, sometimes you do have to wait the full 4 years before you get another opportunity to give them that performance review. But again, I go back to who you vote for matters, whether or not you vote matters, whether or not you run matters. It's important that we actually think about that leadership and make choices that are going to further our collective goals as a society, not just tick a box because you had to vote for something.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving closer to home now, people may or may not be aware that the George Street encampment was removed yesterday. 20 people were relocated to supportive housing units somewhere in the city. And this is a result of the court case. The city was seeking an injunction where they were allowed to remove the George Street encampment, but not the one at the foot of Patricia. So what are you guys' thoughts on that? That one encampment is gone, and hopefully they're all in support of housing units. And while the city has certainly been painted as the bad guy in this, I guess if they're all in support of housing, is that necessarily a bad thing?
Are they?
That's what the city says. I wasn't there when they
was involved in exactly, but
they said 20. The city said they relocated 20 people.
You know, if they are actually have been found places to stay that will work, that's a marvelous thing. But I have my doubts that they're all going to stay in that housing, and it's not a just yeah, I'll grab your stuff, I'll throw it in this room, and you can stay there kind of thing. There's a lot of issues that have to be dealt with, and they need to be making sure that, I mean, they're saying that they have supportive housing, but you've got to make sure that they have the correct support to make it work, you know, and whatever counseling or whatever else they need to get them through it too. So I got my fingers crossed. I hope it's working. I hope it's going to work for a while. But I'm still a little on the skeptical side, you know.
Yeah, I guess the fear or the worry is that the people that were moved there would just end up down at the camp on the foot of Patricia. I don't know that's going to happen, and it's hard to track too, because unless you're down there every day and getting to know everybody who's there, how do you know who's in and who's out? So, Tracy, your thoughts on the whole removal or non-removal?
I don't know. I struggle with the whole situation, because I think legislating against homelessness or legislating against addictions is ridiculous. It's pointless, and it's certainly not helpful. It's just adding stigma. As to the judge's ruling where you remove one encampment and not the other, I struggle with that too. I'm not sure that there's an argument to leave one and not leave both, or vice versa. I don't know. I'm hopeful, like Chuck said, that the folks that were moved into supportive housing are getting some of the help they need. I think it sucks that it took legislation to evict them to get them into that kind of supportive housing. I feel like there must have been a better way or an easier way or a quicker way to have done that work without involving the courts. You know, I see the supportive housing of the wraparound services going up on First Avenue, and it looks like a good building, and it's going up quick. So I'm really got my fingers crossed that more and more folks are going to get into that, because it's too cold to be out there on the streets.
Yeah.
It's just not. It's not a legislative solution. It's not a municipal solution. It has to be all of us again. It's all levels of government. It's everybody has to get involved.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned addictions there. I guess get some comments on this week or earlier this week or late last week. I can't remember when it was now. The province is asking the federal government to allow it, I guess in BC, to legalize some hard drugs, namely heroin, fentanyl, and some of those things, or legalize or decriminalize it, not legalize. Sorry, I got to get my terminology straight there. So basically, a lot of these people, and at the risk of stereotyping people who are homeless, it does have drug addiction is a problem, you know, certainly, and we have the opioid crisis and all that kind of stuff. So do you think that's going to help if we decriminalize small amounts? I think it was 4.5 grams of whatever. I don't count me in that, because I know nothing about what a lot of drugs are and what aren't.
Well, advocates have always said that decriminalization of small amounts of illicit drugs for personal use is a huge piece of the puzzle in terms of trying to address things like this opioid crisis that we're in the middle of here. And by reducing some of that stigma, perhaps people will be able to get more help or won't use alone and die because of poisoned drug supplies. You know, I'm with you. I don't know that much about the various illicit drugs that are out there, but I do know that for all of the years I've been paying attention to public policy, the decriminalization of illicit drugs is absolutely one of the key pieces that advocates and folks that are working with people in the addictions networks have always clamored for. So kudos to BC. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think the idea is that it turns a lot of the issues that you see, you know, in and around homeless camps, for example. Once again, not wanting to stereotype everybody, but it moves it less from being a law enforcement issue and more to being a health issue. Right? If you're dealing with overdoses, that's a health issue, and
it absolutely is a health issue for the individuals that are dealing with the addiction. It is absolutely a healthcare issue. Yeah, the folks that are producing these drugs and importing them and all the rest of it, that's a criminal issue, and that definitely needs to be dealt with by our law enforcement and by the courts. But the individuals who are victims of the drug trade and who are dealing with multi-generational trauma or who have wound up with an addiction because of an injury, you know, those folks are not criminals, and we shouldn't be treating them as such. Not to mention the drain on the law enforcement and the legal system trying to deal with it. It's ridiculous. Let's repurpose that money and that social effort into addressing this as the healthcare crisis that it is. It is not a legal crisis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and hopefully that would free up police for more serious issues, right? I don't know where the RCMP stand on decriminalization of the hard drugs, but I think I would think that it would open them up to do other things, obviously, because they're not dealing with those kind of things. However, the possession thing, it does give the police when they encounter someone, it gives them if they find some drugs, it gives them an easy way to arrest them and then see what else they're doing. I guess I don't know. It's
again, though, I think that arresting someone for a personal use that's there to support an addiction, I don't see why that does you any good. You know, if you want to start addressing things like crime downtown, get rid of all the pawn shops in downtown. They're preying on people that are the most vulnerable in society, and they're encouraging the crime that the business owners are upset about. So the city could make an ordinance ban or whatever the legislation would be to say there will be no pawn shops within city limits of Prince George. That's going to cut down on an awful lot of the foot traffic crime.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know if they can. I remember it was probably a couple of decades ago they tried to deal with escort agencies, right? And you get the business. They tried through the business license. And made the cost of the business license exorbitantly high. And I don't think that stopped anybody.
All of the pawn shops claim they don't take in stolen goods. And yet on more than one occasion, I have taken stolen goods back from them that were stolen from the museum. So they're breaking laws, and they're doing it under the auspices of some kind of authentic business, but they're not. And they are the ones that are creating that market for the stolen property and are doing the work with the folks that are doing the stealing. You're back, Chuck.
Yeah, Chuck's back. So we moved on to, I don't know where you were when we lost you, but we were talking about criminalizing small amounts of hard drugs, and Tracy was just talking about if you want to do something with the crime downtown, is it get rid of the pawn shops?
Oh yeah.
Can city do that?
I think that's a great idea. Let's get rid of the pawn shops. I mean, you talked to a man who lost $14,000 worth of camera equipment one night.
Oh man, did it show up in a pawn shop?
Actually, they didn't show up here. The cops told me, I imagine they'll be on the way to Vancouver by morning.
Yeah, I can imagine.
You know, but yeah.
The check cashing businesses can go too. They're also predatory lenders. And, you know, if we want to start talking about the kind of social problems that are leading to addictions and people being unhoused and petty crime. I don't know why we allow businesses that feed off of that and that feed off of the vulnerable to exist in our communities.
Yeah, the check cashing ones, I've never understood how those businesses get to operate. You know,
That's a dicey situation, those ones. That's
if I lend you $100 and tell you that you got to repay it by Friday, and by Friday you're going to owe me $150, well, geez, that's loan sharking, and I go to jail.
that's
But
exactly.
if I get a business license or be a bank, because the banks do the same thing, all of a sudden that's legal. I've never understood that. I never
It
understood
makes
how
no
that-
sense.
Yeah, makes no sense. So yeah, I agree that, and that's one of the reasons. That's how people get into financial trouble. And then
Yeah, you start out with $100 debt, and 2 months down the road, you've got a $500 debt.
yeah,
Like, hang on, what's going on?
Now, I do think that there are certain members of the vulnerable community that are forced into the check cashing situations because banks won't deal with them. And
Yeah.
so we would need to address that at the same time. There needs to be some requirement that our other more official lending institutions, credit unions and banks, have a means to allow folks to cash a social services check or something like that. But it shouldn't then penalize them for doing that. Like, they're the most vulnerable. And so they have to go to a check cashing place that's also going to take money off of every bit that they cash out for them. It's wrong.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't. I mean, it just reinforces the problem that they have, and it just multiplies and multiplies. It's not a good situation. I don't understand how it was allowed to happen in the first place. You know, I mean, getting back to the whole decriminalizing of drugs. This is small amounts they're talking about. So I think it's 4.5 grams of whatever you're allowed to have, right? I don't understand what the time period is. You're allowed to have 4.5 grams of whatever at any specific time. So if you, I don't know, if you did 4.5 grams of whatever 1 minute, you can have 4.5 grams 5 minutes later. Yeah, I think it's going to be a sticky situation in a lot of ways. I mean, I know it's going to help those that are heavily addicted and need to have something, but it's going to be tough to regulate, well, basically the sellers, the people who are providing this stuff is what worries me more than the people that are actually taking it. You know,
Well, I agree.
yeah,
you're going to have the people.
Nobody's trafficking on, if all they have is 4.5 grams of anything on them, they're not trafficking.
No, but it's the people that are selling it to them that are going to be, I mean, they're going to be blasting around town going, hey, here's your 4.5, here's your 4.5, here's your 4.5. Yeah, I'm having a great day.
But he would then have been holding 15 grams on him, and he's the one that should get arrested.
Yeah, but, you know, he's been holding 15 grams all along and nobody's really touched him. So, you know, I think what we really need to do is get after the people that are dealing this stuff.
yeah.
Well, and maybe the decriminalization will allow for some of that too. Instead of having, you know, RCMP officers arresting somebody for carrying a small amount of personal use, they can ticket that person and move on and really start to do some true damage to the actual industry that is addicting these folks.
Yeah, yeah, and it is an industry. It really is. It's big business.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of money exchanged.
The business side of it is the criminal aspect of it. It's the user side of it that is a healthcare issue, and it should not be treated as a criminal aspect.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. You know, I mean, once you're addicted, there's not a whole bunch you can do. You know, you've got to deal with that in the steps and the ways you can to make it go away if you can, or just live with it if you can. But it's the people that are working on consciously providing and addicting more that are the problem.
Or cutting it with poison. I mean, that's the other.
Yeah, and that's horrible. You don't even know what you're getting. You have no idea. you
Yeah,
know?
that's the crazy thing. And the other thing that we have to realize that a lot of people who are addicted to hard drugs like heroin and that, there's well, let's put it this way: there's a lot more people addicted to heroin in this town or any town than you see down on the street shooting up in an alley. There's a lot of people, professional people, business people, working people, and they get addicted. However, right, like you say, it could be an injury gone wrong, got too much or whatever.
Yeah.
You could talk to people at the needle exchange, and they'll tell you, yeah, it's not just the people that are coming in off the street to get the needle exchange. So, yeah, dealing with the people who are dealing is tantamount, right?
Big
Yeah,
Pharma went out of
actually,
its way to addict populations to opioids. They
Yeah.
encouraged the prescribing of them. They hid the fact that they knew they were addictive. And that's where this opioid problem is coming from. It's middle-aged white men with back problems are the ones that are dying. And they're dying alone in their rooms because they're embarrassed that they are addicted and that now they're using illicit drugs. So if we treat
they're not going to go and get help.
Exactly.
They're not. I actually talked to a fellow the other day, and we had actually probably half-hour conversation about this, who got addicted to Oxy after being beat up, mugged. And he said to me, why do they give people this stuff for painkillers?
Yeah.
We got along without it before. Why give it to people? You know what it does to them.
Yeah, it's highly addictive, and Big Pharma knew it.
Yeah.
There's no question. So now we're dealing with the fallout from that. And that's, again, I say that's the criminal side of this. But the poor guy who had it prescribed to him way too many times, who now can't do without it, is the one that deserves our sympathy and our help, and not just to get thrown in jail or to be stigmatized.
Yeah. And the thing with Oxy is that you don't need to be prescribed it necessarily more than one time.
No, well, that's the thing.
It's really potent and addictive, right? I talked to a guy a couple of years ago. I remember talking, and that's what he buggered up his knee or somehow. I'm not sure. He might have had knee surgery or did something with his knee, anyways. And they went in. The doctor just, here, take these, and it's a big bottle of Oxy, and there's enough there to get addicted. It's like just keep taking them until the pain goes away. And
Hydromorphone's the other one. It's synthetic morphine.
Yeah.
And that's the other one they hand out like crazy right now for anyone that has surgery or any kind of an injury, and doesn't seem to matter what age they are or what state in life. I've had numbers of people that I know well, they've got hydromorphone and they're like, this stuff's crazy. Like, why are they giving me this?
There you go.
Why are they giving it to them?
If you believe the conspiracies, it's the kickbacks that come out of the pharma companies that have started the habit of prescribing this. But I don't know how much of that is true. What I do know is that the pharmacy companies knew full well this stuff was hyper addictive, and all the early marketing absolutely claimed it was not. And I know that doctors were given large amounts of it as free samples to give to patients. Well, not much different than what the drug dealers do.
And that's exactly it. Here, have some of this. You'll love it.
Yeah.
So, it's going to take away all your problems.
And it will. I often joke my recipe for world peace is that everybody on the planet gets a shot of Demerol all at the same time.
It works for 4 hours, though.
Yeah, that's what they give me. I had back surgery a long time ago, and holy man, and that wasn't for pain. That was to take the edge off, because they give it to you before you go into surgery, so you're not anxious going in, right? And oh man, it's like, yeah, we're gonna take a knife and we're gonna cut you open, and we're gonna reach inside and yank something out. Oh, great,
I know they did the same thing to me.
And that's the other part of it is that stuff like that. If you ever had a shot like Demerol or something, you can understand how well, for one thing, it's easy to get addicted to, but it's like all your worries go away, all your pain, nothing bothers you.
They gave me that when I had a lung collapse years ago. They gave me Demerol, and they were putting in it's like a dam, a thing that evacuates the air out of your chest cavity. I photographed it.
Oh, wow.
I asked the doctor, is it cool if I take pictures? Yeah, sure, I guess. So I sat there and took pictures. I was seeing you operating on me. This is how this stuff is. So yeah, it's bad news. You don't want to give that to everybody.
You men are babies. If you had to menstruate, you'd all be addicted to something.
Well, there you go.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Exactly. But like they say, like drugs like that is when you take it the one time, you get that high, you get that feeling. The next time you never get that feeling again. But you got to continue to take the drug. That's certainly what they talk about with heroin, right? Yeah. And that's why you need more all the time. Is that initial high, that first time you took it, you just felt so good, and then you keep taking it, and you never feel that good again, even though you're taking heroin. You can never catch that same high. And that's part of the problem, because then you end up taking more and more because you want to get higher and higher. And there's a cliff at the end of that high. Let's put it that way. So.
Well, and the problems really aren't to do with the drug at all. It's whatever got you to the point where you started taking them.
Yeah.
And so that circles back to a discussion around equity and fair play and empathy and social connection. And, there's so many other reasons that people get addicted to anything, whether it's cigarettes or coffee or heroin. I think that when you're talking about an addiction and you're talking about those kind of problems, you have to back it up a bunch of steps before you started taking that pill. Was it a back injury, or was it a financial problem that you were trying to avoid? Or there's bigger issues at play here. And I think as a society, we have hopefully matured to the point where we recognize that now. And so again, I'll circle back to the very beginning of our conversation where I said that the leadership that we deserve and need in British Columbia, in Canada, in the world right now is leadership that has evolved, that understands that all of this stuff is interconnected, and you can't just address the removal of a homeless camp on George Street and think you've dealt with the unhoused problem and societal impacts of multi-generational trauma simply by removing them. Mm-hmm. It's far too complicated. And the old way of thinking about things is not going to get us to where we need to be.
Yeah, we definitely need to change, because you have to look at, okay, there's a homeless camp down there. Like, how did all these people get there? And every story is different. Exactly. And just simply moving them somewhere doesn't solve that problem. Like how they got there, you have to address how each of these people individually got there, got to that point, right? And that's how you and that's not easy. It's very, very difficult, because like I said, everybody's different, and it's more than just picking somebody up and putting them in a hotel room and leave them alone, because then the same old issues will continue to plague them. Right?
When you start to factor in the shame and the loneliness and the fears that folks are dealing with on top of whatever the problems were that got them to that state in the first place, the strength that they show just by getting up every day blows my mind. And I think that they're definitely vulnerable, but they're not necessarily always victims. These are strong people that have pride and goals and desires. And, again, we like to just make everybody be the same. And so therefore, if you're on the street, here's who you are. And if you have a job in a mall.
Lost Tracy again. She was right in mid speech too. So thank Mark Zuckerberg for doing the. You just got censored by Mark Zuckerberg, I think.
I did.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
What's his new name? Mega or something?
The metaverse. Has anybody looked at that?
I don't think I want to be a part of it.
No, it's kind of like.
One of my favorite movies is Ready Player One. And it sounds an awful lot like Ready Player One. And there's an awful lot of bad stuff that could happen there. So I'm just like, maybe not. Well,
I look at this as that I think for us as humanity, as a species, as a planet to move forward, the the less we are unconnected with everyone. I know it's all about being connected, but it really isn't. It's another reason to sit in front of your computer, and of course that's what we're doing right now. But
we're actually interacting, which is nice.
Yeah, it's just nothing beats face-to-face real meeting with people, and that's the nice thing about hopefully as we progress through the pandemic and where things are, we can do that, more of that. So I see the metaverse as doing less of that, more of where we can exist in a world that isn't real.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
And that's problematic, I think.
I think that's the whole premise behind it, is that, okay, so we're all getting used to being separated. Well, we can separate together and make things wonderful. And I'm just like, no, that's not the plan, man. I don't want to stay in my room for the rest of my life, Like, come on. There's an idea that eventually this will all be over and we will be able to go out and do things again and hang together again. And I'm looking forward to that. I'm not looking forward to buying another computer that is capable of handling the newest, greatest, whatever, Windows 11, which both of my computers cannot handle Windows 11 for some reason. And it's just like, come on. I mean, the computers I have now are so powerful that the computers I had in, like, say 1995 or even the year 2000 are like Timex watches, so I don't want to live in a world where I have to have a computer that's used to be housed in 10 blocks of New York City in concrete bunker. I mean, come on. Yeah, tell me about it. I know the things are amazing. They're huge power.
Yeah.
But I don't want to have to live in a world where I have to leverage that.
Yeah. And I have a Mac computer, and I have the same problem. I use a laptop that is now 5 or 6 years old, and I can't update it anymore because I don't have any room. And it's not like I have scads of photos or videos stacked on my hard drive. It is pretty much taken up with my system hardware because I've kept it updated. And it's updated to the point where computer that I had 5 years ago isn't powerful enough just to handle the operating system that is in the computer now.
Yeah.
So if I try to update now, it basically crashes the computer. So on the other side, it works fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It still works. I can write stories. I could post, update my website, do this kind of thing. But
I have a 1999 computer still operating down in the museum basement, running our building systems that we disconnected from the internet so that it wouldn't try and get updates and crash itself.
Oh, yeah.
One of the pieces we're replacing during this expansion, but there's been a steady parade of folks come through to look at it and just marvel. Wow, that's still running. Oh my God, is that DOS? Yeah, it's pretty entertaining.
Yeah. I know.
Planned obsolescence. That's exactly where all of this has gone, is planned obsolescence.
Yeah. In some ways, it's absolutely fascinating. It's amazing what these things can do now, and you talk about computers of old. My first computer was a Mac Plus, and I think the RAM, when we talk about RAM, was like 1.5 megabytes. Now we talk about gigabytes and terabytes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So,
yeah.
And it was impressive in its day. That's but now we're sounding old. What's that?
10100 laptop.
Oh, wow.
It ran off 4 AA batteries. It had I think it was a 4-line 10-inch wide LCD screen on it.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it had 128K of RAM, I think. I went through college from that machine. I wrote all my stories, everything.
Yeah.
And now I have, okay, so I do photos. I have a, uh, what is it, an Intel i7 powered desktop with, came originally with 2 terabytes of hard drive. I've added another terabyte hard drive to it and 3 external drives, which equal another, what, like 12 terabytes. It has 16 gigs of RAM and it cannot run Windows 11.
Oh, man.
I was just like, really? You're telling me this? I can't believe it.
There's actually a real discussion going on in the museum world about which pieces of equipment museums need to accession and retain so that in the future, when folks find an old drive or an old floppy disk or something, like we're the ones you're going to be coming to try and actually unpack these things. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a really interesting time to be looking at trying to preserve data and which field you want to keep it in. You figure I've got oral histories on reel-to-reel tapes. I have photos on glass negatives. So we're porting all of that forward every time there's a technological advance. It's out of control at the moment. You can't keep up.
Yeah, and that's one of the real world problems with this, right? Is like, I think back when we were at the Free Press, is that we burned all our photos onto CDs, and it's kind of like now I don't have the ability because my laptop doesn't have a CD player, and a lot of them don't nowadays. So if you have all this stuff, like you say, Tracy, like how do you access it? And reel to reel, and going back to floppy disks. Remember floppy disks? A lot of information is like, and how to preserve that. And I get frustrated because a lot of the stuff now gets stored in the cloud. Well, the problem with that is if you don't have Wi-Fi connection, which where we are, you're in the city, fine, but a lot of times you're not in the city, you don't have Wi-Fi, and you're hooped. You want to access something, it's like on mine, like I say, it drives me crazy. I save stuff to my desktop. My desktop automatically goes to the iCloud or to the cloud. And if I don't have Wi-Fi, even though I saved it onto my desktop, it's not there.
Yeah, it's gone.
It's gone.
You go looking for it and you go, ooh, where's the...
Yeah,
it's
so
gone.
it is frustrating. It is tough. So
Why no one's got hard files anymore either. It's
exactly.
It is a very interesting perspective to sit us in the catbird seat here at a museum and watch society evolve, because I can look back too at all of the last couple hundred years and even more and think, geez, the speed of change is what's crazy right now, and the speed of the degradation of what it is you're storing. Like I said, I've got glass negs that are 100 years old and they're perfect. They reproduce better now than anything I can shoot currently. But that floppy disk or that CD full of photos, it's dead in 20 years.
Yep.
So then you have to keep moving it forward and forward and forward. And yeah, it's a really interesting challenge right now. And it's going to make a lot of what we have been retaining ephemera. It's not going to be there when folks want it 50 years from now.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks that this stuff is safe on CD. It's not.
Nope.
When you saved all those photos to your CDs, they're starting to degrade now.
Yeah.
And they
we actually
really
store
are
them.
a problem.
They're in climate controlled cold storage in that basement in order to make sure that we extend them as long as we can while we try and figure out what to port them over to. And we're actually starting to find that most museums are just printing everything again. We're going right back to a hard copy.
There you go.
That makes sense. Yeah, you talk to a man who has like probably 500,000 photos stashed on hard drives. And I keep thinking, how long are those hard drives going to last?
Not long.
Not long
9
at
years
all.
tops.
Yeah. And then I was started thinking, well, maybe I'll go to SSDs. Well, how long before the data starts to leach out of chips? We don't know yet, but there's going to be a definite time.
Yeah, exactly.
So
but anyway, sorry, we're coming up on the hour, so we should probably We got way off topic here, but that's all right. Still a good conversation going. We will save this somewhere on the cloud,
Yes.
and people can access this in 100 years and may or may not be able to see it. So,
Hopefully.
any parting comments before we sign off?
I would like to say it's winter, people. Time for winter tires. And
Yes,
time to remember that you cannot stop in 10 feet. So
yeah, if yesterday wasn't enough of a reminder for you to get your winter tires on, then you probably never will. So, Tracy?
Well, I'll give folks a reminder that I think Studio Fair is still happening this year and that they are doing something over at CN Center, I believe. Yes. I don't know the details. I just saw it came up in my calendar. So Studio Fair is this weekend, folks.
And time change this weekend. Remind everybody to turn your clocks back this weekend. So hopefully this will be one of the last times we ever have to do that. But on that note, thanks for watching, and thanks Tracy and Chuck for a good conversation again today.
Take care.